From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Paul, Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. This evening is the top of the week. That means it's time for some news, but not perhaps the news you would see on your typical Reddit feed. We are instead exploring what we like to call strange news. We're going to talk a little bit about cryptids. I have a big soapbox on this one because I think maybe cryptids, maybe we're not finding cryptids because we're giving them insulting names. Calling someone Bigfoot and wondering why they don't want to hang out with you is kind of rude. You know, what makes the Loch Ness monster a monster? That's unfair.
Bigfoot's feet are objectively big. Or are they? Maybe it's a misnomer entirely.
Who are we to judge? The next thing we're going to look at as well, we're going to solve the mystery of Flannery Associates, which we mentioned on a previous strange news segment. Before we do any of that, we're going to dive into a bit of neuroscience. We are going to witness with you how much human civilization still has to learn about the human brain. And it's safe to say there's a heck of a recent plot twist. Maybe we start there. Maybe we travel down south, past the equator, go visit some of our friends and fellow conspiracy realists in Australia.
Yeah, we're heading down under again, everybody. Get hyped. We're heading to the southeastern coast of Australia, to the state of New South Wales. Guys, that's the home of Sydney and Canberra, or Canberra if you live in the area. Look, if you were going to take a test right now and somebody said, hey, what's the capital of Australia? You know what I'd say? Sydney. What would you guys say?
Queensland? Is that a place in Australia?
It is a place. Melbourne is another really good guess. But Canberra is the capital of Australia. I didn't know that. It's kind of like the Washington, D.C. of Australia. It's news to me. Just wanted to share that because I was excited about learning it. Okay, so that's where we're heading. We're going to tell you a little story about a woman who experienced some stuff. In January 2021, this 64-year-old woman who lives in this area was suffering through 3 weeks of abdominal pain, diarrhea, a constant dry cough, fever, and night sweats. This is early 2021, guys. So with those stinky symptoms, what might you think is going on?
COVID.
Right? Seems like a virus, seems like something maybe even she ate, right? But then her symptoms started to evolve to become more neurological. She started experiencing, quote, forgetfulness and depression. Some might think, oh, that's associated with feeling so crappy all the time. Like, this is awful. You might feel some of this stuff. But the forgetfulness is a little weird. So she gets admitted to the hospital. She receives a brain scan, an MRI, and it reveals, quote, an atypical lesion within the right frontal lobe of her brain. So that's not good. Well, what do you think about when you hear a strange lesion on your brain?
One would automatically think cancer.
Cancer, right? That's where my head goes. And we can only assume that that's where this patient's head went. It's really scary stuff.
Especially if she checked WebMD, where everything is cancer.
Right?
Yikes.
But anytime a doctor scans your brain and says, hey, there's something abnormal, that's just kind of what we've been trained to think.
It's the most likely cause.
Unless it's some kind of traumatic brain injury, right? Where you get a scan and it shows, what is that called? CTE? Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or something like that.
Right. But an MRI would also give enough information to a doctor to differentiate between the two.
Right. And in this case, nobody knew. And this is the scariest part. This patient lived with that stuff for over a year and a half before she finally, in June 2022, underwent a brain biopsy at Canberra Hospital to investigate this thing. that's going on in her brain. And the neurosurgeon who performed this procedure, Dr. Hari Priya Bandi, B-A-N-D-I, Bandi, she spoke with this outfit called DW News on Tuesday, August 29th. That's yesterday as we record this. And this is a pretty long quote from her. It's directly from that DW News interview. You can watch it right now. But this is what that biopsy discovered. Quote, and this is a great way to set this up. She says, neurosurgery is exceptionally planned. We very rarely find something we're not expecting to find. During this case, we did an open biopsy of the skull. We opened up the normal tissues. That's including the skull itself, then the normal tissues that we normally do. We found an abnormal brain. It looked a little bit discolored. The doctor had taken a few samples, just a few millimeters off of the top there, and they didn't look abnormal. So they've got this woman's skull open, looking at her brain. It looks discolored, but it's not, there's nothing else crazy going on. So this doctor then decides they're going to actually dissect a part of the brain that is looking abnormal that, might need to be removed if it's in fact a tumor, right? So she begins the process of dissecting very carefully this part of the brain because she noticed that it was behaving very much like a tumor, whatever it was. So then she goes in with forceps, you guys, specific tumor holding forceps. And she started to lift something out from this patient's brain. And she says it was, quote, something that definitely was not what I was expecting. It was a linear squiggling line. My junior doctor said, is that an artery? Because that's what it looked like. And I said, it's not an artery. We're nowhere near any arteries. And then I noticed it was moving. And I immediately went, just please get it out of my forceps. We rapidly put it into a pathology pot, just a small little container there. And it was, in fact, a vigorously wiggling worm. Just going to let that sit for a second. Yeah. They pulled a worm out of this patient's brain. We're not talking like squiggling around the top of the skull kind of area around. It was inside the folds of the brain.
Now, how is the patient?
According to The Guardian, the patient is recovering well and is still being regularly monitored, but all seems to be okay. We're going to get into that because it seems like at least doctors, when they started figuring out what this thing was, why it was there, how it got there, the belief is that there was some kind of prior immunocompromising that occurred in this patient that allowed this specific infection to occur. But let's talk about what that infection is. How the heck do you get a worm in your brain? Well, specifically a nematode. This is a nematode, not a worm. Kind of a worm. Yeah, it's a roundworm, right? Exactly. A specific type of worm. It was 3 inches in length. It was bright red. 3 inches, by the way, is about 8 centimeters. And the doctors, the neurosurgeon pulls a worm out of a brain. You go, I deal with brains, not worms. What the heck is this thing? So they start literally opening textbooks, trying to figure out what the heck this species is, why it's there, how it got there. They're stumped. They call a specialist who deals in parasitic creatures, and they almost immediately go, oh, wow, I know exactly what that is.
I just love it. I love it. It's like, damn it, Jim. I'm a neurosurgeon, not a helminthologist, which is the word for study of worms.
There you go.
Nice.
There you go.
Nematodes can typically be microscopic as well, right?
Yeah, and even nematodes come in all shapes and sizes. There's a really great website you can go to for Australian species called, it's got a terrible title here. It's the Atlas of Living Australia. So maybe search that, you can find it. And it actually gives you like the kingdom, phylum, class, goes all the way down to the species. It's really great. Nematoda is a phylum, so just below animal kingdom when it comes to classification.
Oh, and let me correct myself here. Sorry, I don't want to mislead anybody. I am incorrect partially. I believe helminthology in specific is the study of parasitic worms. So hashtag not all worms.
Even more specific and even better for this story, Ben. Perfect. So this thing is called an Ophidioscaris Robertsy. That's how I'm going to say it. Or it could be Robertsy. I think
if you say Robertsy, you got to do the thing with your hands.
I'm sorry.
That's up to Rob, who is either a genius helminthologist or a kind of dirty person.
Yeah. But this Robertsy, it's a roundworm usually found in snakes, specifically pythons, that are, in various parts of the world, but these specifically in this part of Australia, around the lakes, like the fresh waters in this area. And this Canberra hospital patient, according to everyone that's reporting, especially the people who discovered it, this is the world's first case of this type of parasite being found not only in a human, but in a human brain. Yeehaw, everybody.
Do we have theories?
Yes, there are theories.
Okay,
so kind of similarly to our previous little story out of Australia with fungi, this deals with somebody who is going out and finding food growing just naturally where it grows. Foraging, stuff called warrigal greens. It's also called grass. It's kind of like spinach. It's what it's been compared to in the news a lot. But it grows around specific lakes in this region of Australia. And this patient would go out, forage some of that stuff, clean it properly, probably boil it in preparation for cooking and eat it. The thought, or the hypothesis at least, is that some python, one of the pythons that hang out in this grass as well, they shed one of these parasites because they get infected with these parasites. And the patient somehow interacted with grass that had this stuff shed on it, and it got into her system in one way or the other, right? Probably not through the cooking or preparation or anything, but prior to that, like when you're rummaging around in the grass trying to actually collect some of it. Or potentially it transferred some kind of egg, right, to like a kitchen utensil and just went in her mouth. Again, it's
Cronenberg body horror stuff right here, man.
Well, yeah. Well, and it would explain why she had such abdominal pains and problems, right, prior to her having brain issues and, feeling forgetful and feeling depressed and something's wrong. It started probably in her system somewhere else. The big question is, how in the heck did it get into her brain?
What's the pathway from the abdominal tract to the brain? There really isn't one, I don't think.
Well, that's the old look. This is where I don't understand, and I haven't seen it written about, but questions about the blood-brain barrier and what could actually pass through that, right? Could one of these eggs somehow, through the process of the reproduction of this thing, could it get through there and then live? Who knows? The Guardian has been snubbed, BBC News, ABC, Australian Broadcasting Company, and nobody is given a good explanation of how the heck it actually happened, right? Everybody's got a hypothesis because it's the only case and we don't have all the information. It should be noted that this patient is being treated, or had to be treated, on a continual basis after this for other eggs that potentially infected her body from the same species, right? So stuff that could be in the liver as well, or just sticking around in other parts of her body. But it's weird because this is the first human patient that's ever been treated with the stuff that you would need to kill off this parasite. Usually that's more of a veterinary thing for, again, pythons and snakes. So, koalas have been infected with this thing. There are several other...
Do you guys remember a show called The Koala Show? It was a show on Nick Jr. About a young girl and her imaginary friends who were koalas from a magical koala land. That's what I think of when I think of koalas, so...
Nice. I don't know. I like them. I still like them. But okay, I got to leave you with two things, guys. There's a professor named Peter Colligan, I think is how you would say his name. He's an infectious disease physician. He's not involved in this case whatsoever, but he was interviewed. I think it was for The Guardian for this. And he makes the note that some cases of this type of zoonotic disease may never be diagnosed if they are rare and physicians don't know what the heck they're looking for, because a physician, as we've talked about before, only knows what they've learned, what they've encountered before, what's in a book that they've been taught. If it's not in there and if it's not part of your experience as a physician, you may look right over something, right? Which is kind of what happened to this patient. And Professor Colligan has this last thing, this little quote for our nightmares. Quote, sometimes people die with the cause never being found. Good night, everybody. No, I'm just showing you. But there's one last thing to look up. And I think this is the true stuff they don't want you to know. There's an article from ABC News, that's the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, from July 31st, 2023, about a roundworm that was discovered in the permafrost of Siberia in 2018. It emerged living, alive from the permafrost, and it is believed to be 46,000 years old. So a nematode, not this exact species, but a very similar roundworm that lived that long, that has who knows what other stuff going on with it. And these things, as the ice melts, whatever, different types of things are going to be emerging. Oh, what happens if that emerging occurs, I don't know, a little further south than Australia?
Oh, goodness.
Right down in Antarctica.
Oh,
who knows?
geez.
So, hey, we've got that to look forward to. Again, sleep tight, everybody. We'll be right back with more strange news.
We've returned with more strange news. This time, an old favorite, a blast from the past. One of the original cryptid trading cards, old Nessie. Yeah, you guys remember
Yay.
Nessie? My memory of I think I went to Scotland once when I was very little and don't remember it. My mom always used to tell the story about I went to England and Scotland when I was a kid and that I pooped my pants all over the country, and she loved telling that story.
Okay.
So that's I was a small child, but my point is that I from that sojourn I ended up with a stuffed animal that was a Loch Ness monster wearing one of those hats, those signature Scottish, is it called a tam? One of those kind of, what's the word? Like kind of, not paisley. That's not it at all. Like a tartan? I don't know. It's the hat. It looks kind of like a beret, but it's got the red and black stripes on it and then like kind of a ball in the middle. It was a little Nessie stuffy that had that. And I think you could wind it up and it would play a little song. I no longer have that, but I have the memory, and that's all that really matters. Just like most of us in this conspiracy realist community probably have our own special memories of the Loch Ness monster. And Ben, you set it up beautifully, and you had a really on-point tweet about this. It's a little bit derisive to call this creature a monster right off the rip. It never hurt nobody. We don't know about any ill will that this... it's always been described to me, or at least in the lore, as sort of a gentle giant of the depths, right?
I mean, it's nice to think of it that way. That's a lovely sentiment, but we don't know what happens in those depths.
That's true. I know this is sort of maybe like a thing you could apply to cryptids in general, but like, what are your memories and relationship with the old Nessie? Let's just go with Nessie, which I think maybe is a response to the monster conundrum, just going by Nessie.
Oh, sure. Thanks for asking. Yeah, the thing with cryptids, that's one of the sort of holy trinity, the popular triumvirate of cryptids for kids growing up in the West. You will usually hear about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness monster, and then you get the one wild card. If you're in West Virginia, it might be the Mothman. If you are in parts of Florida, it might be the swamp or the skunk ape. It might be La Llorona, your favorite ghost. The thing about both Bigfoot and Nessie is that it seems at first blush a possible or plausible occurrence, because the real argument is a relic population, right, of some creature that has gone extinct in other parts of the world. And the lochs, which are basically lakes, no offense, Scotland, the lochs are things that formed quite some time ago. So the question is there a loch that is large enough and deep enough to function as a goldfish bowl, for lack of a better word, for some sort of creature that exists nowhere else? And lest we throw the Nessie out with the bathwater here, or throw the nematode out with the brain, we have to remember that for many, many years, the mammoth only existed on a couple of isolated parts of the globe. So it is theoretically possible for something we would consider a cryptid to be alive in the modern day. I have to ask you, Noel, you told us your memories of Scotland. Matt, you got a Nessie story? Have you been to Scotland? I have not.
No, I have no idea. I haven't heard about Nessie in a while. So what's the scoop?
Well, first of all, to Ben's point about this is the first thing that popped into my mind, which is, how big is Loch Ness? At its deepest point, it is 230 meters or 126 fathoms or 755 feet, which is apparently deeper than the North Sea. So it is the second deepest loch in Scotland after Loch Morar. And a bunch of Nessie enthusiasts, Nessie hunters, Nessie truthers have been busy over the past weekend when the largest gathering of Loch Ness hunters, Nessie hunters, assembled, to have an exploration. And obviously, to your point, Matt, there really hasn't been a whole lot of Nessie news in a very long time. The most famous picture of it, I think the only one of note, I believe, came out in like the 30s, and has largely been debunked and is believed to be a hoax. The one, classic, always associated with any kind of cryptid imagery in documentaries or whatever. It's a black and white photo of a long neck thing sticking up out of the water.
Or a guy doing a shadow puppet. It's 1934.
Yeah.
Technology was not.
It's true.
What it is now.
Remember, there was a really great story. Now I'm forgetting. We talked to a really lovely person once on this podcast who had a show that kind of debunked urban legends. Matt, it may have been someone that you hooked us up with, and did a story about these fairies, these photographs of fairies in like the 40s or 50s that these young girls totally faked using analog photography and like little cutouts and stuff. But they had such depth and clarity, and they were just so remarkable that people truly believed them. And it was also a small village in the United Kingdom. I'm sorry, I'm totally spacing on the name of the podcast and the village. But to your point, Ben, yeah, it can be done. But I don't recall, maybe y'all do, how this was debunked, or if it was mainly just kind of popular wisdom points to it probably isn't authentic. But I don't know that there's any aha moment of this is who did it and how they did it.
The purported Faye photograph, or
no, the Nessie photograph.
Yeah, the original one was 1934.
Yeah.
Right? That was like the super popular one, and it was in the 90s, I think. Almost exactly 60 years later, that it was discovered to be a toy boat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's like something applied to a toy boat.
Got it. But can you say toy boat 5 times fast? That's the question. Okay.
Yeah, toy boat 5 times fast. You also,
there you go. Well done.
This famous photograph comes out shortly after the mainstreaming of prehistoric cryptids with the 1933 debut of King Kong. And so the public is primed to learn more about things that seem exotic to them. And then, just like so many other local regional legends, the people in the area realize this is pretty great for tourism. So,
Ben nailed it. Alan McKenna. Yeah, no. I mean, just in general, that's obviously true. And what better reason obviously exploration, discovery, whatever, maybe, hopefully they find a thing. That'd be cool. But what other better reason to assemble such a large gathering of searchers than to make a little bit of news and get Nessie back in the headlines. Alan McKenna, who's the head of something called the Loch Ness Exploration, which is an independent research group that's based in the area, planned this event and looked at it as kind of a way to rally sort of hobbyist cryptid hunters in the area to come out. And I imagine people probably traveled, for it as well. And McKenna is quoted as saying, "It's about inspiration. And for very selfish reasons, I don't want the Loch Ness mystery or interest in Loch Ness itself to diminish in any way whatsoever at all." Guessing those selfish reasons may refer to the 41 million pounds roughly that this type of tourism can bring into Scotland's economy. That's according to a 2018 study by by Scotland's Press and Journal newspaper.
Nice.
And there's an article that I'm looking at right now in NBC News, the World section, about this event. It's also been covered by Insider and a host of other outlets. So mission accomplished, made some headlines. And the funniest story that I did find, though, was apparently, hold on, let me see if I can pull it up. I seem to have closed this tab. Here we go. Loch Ness monster hunters say they heard mysterious gloops underwater, but forgot to plug in their recorder.
No.
Yeah. I can't remember if I was talking about this on the show or if it was off the show, but there is a really cool thing called a hydrophone, which is a microphone that, can record sounds underwater. And they're really pricey. Like it's not something that just like an enthusiast would probably want to invest in. They're like thousands of dollars for a good one. It's actually something that's used a lot in electronic music communities to make, you could drop a Alka-Seltzer or like a Mentos into a thing and it makes crazy sounds.
Well, and the Office of Naval Intelligence knows a thing or two about this.
That's right. Yes.
Also, that's 100% unrelated, but very important. Do you need to worry about cryptids that more than likely don't exist, or do you need to worry about animals that are very real and are incredibly threatened? I'm thinking of cetaceans. I'm thinking of whales. People tell you they don't know much about the life cycle of whales, and that is somewhat bullshit, to be completely honest. The massive amount of signaling that goes out through the maritime environment of this planet, it's screwing over whales. That's basically it. Imagine someone continually screaming strange things into your ear. That's what's happening. Hydrophones are awesome, but hydrophones are picking up stuff that is bad for whales. The conspiracy theory, just to sew it up real quick, is that the investigation into the life cycle of these beautiful creatures is somewhat stymied by geopolitical security concerns.
No doubt. And also those sounds that you're talking about, Ben, that are interfering with whale communication, it does seem to have finally driven some of them mad, or at the very least, just they're sick and tired of it, and they are revolting. Not as in like they're gross, they're revolting against humans. We've obviously covered multiple whale instances of orcas menacing boats and other animals that are kind of saying enough is enough, humans, get off our collective lawn. But the quote from Alan McKenna once again about the missed opportunity was this. We did hear something, he said. We heard 4 distinctive gloops. I love gloops. We all got a bit excited, ran to make sure the recorder was on, and it wasn't plugged in. Oof. Better luck next time.
It does remind me of the bloop that we've talked about before on the show.
Is that the same as what's the other one? The pang? No, there's another sound. The whoosh.
The deep sea bloop.
What the heck am I thinking of?
The deep sea bloop is most likely a very low register shifting of ice plates.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Right, unless it's Cthulhu or the basis of the Cthulhu legends, which were written in the early 1900s by a problematic guy. But
there's also another famous conspiracy sound that has a funny name that I'm totally spacing on right now. But
the pang sounded so familiar.
It sounded familiar. It'll come to me when I don't care anymore. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, is this all just, do you think there's true believers out there? Do you think it's a mix of just folks that wanted to have a little, day on the loch and do some, people are bringing drones out. Apparently the weather was quite bad. But it still did occur. If they're ever going to find it, it's going to be now, I guess. Mm-hmm. It is one of those things where it's sort of like, if they haven't found it yet, why? And we've asked and sort of answered that question. Mm-hmm. There certainly are places for things to scurry away and avoid being detected, but it just seems very unlikely that if something that large did exist, that it wouldn't have been discovered, or there'd be proof by now. A plesiosaur isn't that one of the theories that maybe
that was the most popular for a long time. The idea being that in the formation of what becomes the modern lochs or lakes in Scotland, and then also in Ireland, that there was some population that managed to get there and reproduce successfully while the land changed. The problem is, from what folks know about this, there doesn't seem to be a likely way that those creatures at that time could have gotten into this place and survived. However, to answer your earlier question from a minute or so ago, like the idea of searching for it, yeah, man, there are true believers out there, and yeah, there are people who are just having a fun time. That's a cool idea for a hangout time with your friends. And also there's the non-zero chance that we learn something interesting. I think that's so cool. I'm so Fox Mulder about it.
No, I think you're on the right track. In the articles, like for Reuters that were written about this, they discuss how there are some students who chose to write their essay on this particular thing, right? So not only are they looking for Nessie on this day, they're discovering history, right?
Yes.
They're what other kinds of
learning about the ecosystem.
Exactly.
You know? Mm-hmm.
The things you discover by searching for a cryptid, I think are they're plentiful and probably priceless.
Turns out the cryptid was in us all.
Yeah,
all
the
along,
real monster was the friends we made along the way.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think that gets us wrapped for this one. Let's take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and come back with one more piece of strange news.
We have returned, and this is a bit of an update on an earlier strange news segment. As you may recall, longtime fellow conspiracy realist, there has been for a number of years a somewhat sketchy company buying up a lot of land in California, land that is adjacent to a place called Travis Air Force Base. Travis Air Force Base is a big deal. And this land, which is a bit northeast of the San Francisco Bay Area, is also the kind of land you would ignore normally. It is what is called fallow farmland, meaning that it is appropriate for growing stuff, but often people aren't growing things there. So in our previous conversation, previously on Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, sorry, Matt?
I had a question about fallow, just because in my head, again, guys, all of my knowledge comes from MTG vocabulary. In my head, fallow would mean like you can't grow on it, but it's also like, it could be potentially just nobody's been using it for that. Is that the idea?
That's right. That's my understanding as well.
Fallow is like a recovery period for the soil. So if depending on what you grow from the land, it may take certain nutrients, right? And that would mean that you cannot reasonably grow the same sort of crop continually over time. So with that idea, the concept is it's not as though, a la Pet Cemetery, the soil is sour. More that, it's
Triggered.
more, right. It's more that you're saying we want to grow this thing and we can't always grow it. And there's a lot of old technology around this. In Native American culture, you got the three sisters, right? These three different crops, one can grow simultaneously in a way that allows the land to always grow. So anyway, that stuff aside, there's this fallow farmland. There's this shady outfit that is based in Delaware, called Flannery Associates. And they bought 55,000 acres of mainly farmland. In Northern California. And we were asking, who is this? And I reached out to some other folks offline who didn't know. And some of their guesses were, because of the Air Force Base, they were saying possibly this is someone who is former military, former USAF or something, and they know something the public doesn't. So they're leveraging insider info, which happens all the time.
Or like, is it just the base or somebody representing the base, like trying to expand the crap out of it,
Right. Without spooking out the hoi polloi and the folks living around the area. What we learned is that this group is backed by Silicon Valley investors, like a guy who is like venture capitalist, the guy who founded LinkedIn, all these dudes. The point person for this is a guy named Jan Sramek. 36 years old, used to work for Goldman Sachs. And yeah. So a few years back, this guy began looking for investors and saying some of the same things that we've said on this show about the challenges faced by San Francisco, right? It is geographically bound, it is wrestling with inequality. It's wrestling with instability. You can live pretty well if you make $150,000 a year in most parts of the United States. But San Francisco is just not one of those parts. It certainly is not. And so the idea here is that this coterie or this cabal of folks are going to start their new city. You know what I mean? Like Bender and Futurama. We'll do our own thing, with blackjack and other stuff. So Flannery Associates wants to build an entirely new city in this area. And they say we're going to have orchards there. We're going to have solar energy farms. We're going to have tens upon thousands of new homes. And we're going to have parks. We're going to have open space. Now that the news has gone public, I think with the permission of the very wealthy people who are planning this, you can read about it in a great piece by The Verge, a great piece by The Guardian, a great piece by San Francisco Gate, or SF Gate as it's called. They have, and Wall Street Journal, if you read Wall Street Journal, they got in trouble because they were coming up to these folks who owned this farmland. And even if those folks weren't trying to sell, this Flannery Associates group would come in through a fixer and they would say, "What's your price?" And a lot of times people would say, "What do you got?" And that's what happened.
Well, yeah, some landowners were I'm seeing it reported, Ben, that some people were getting like twice the amount of money their land was worth, 3 times the amount it was worth.
Yes, 100% they were. And then there was also Flannery is getting sued with getting hit with allegations that they were engaging in price fixing. There are counter lawsuits we hear where people are saying they felt like they were being intimidated or forced into selling their stuff. And now we know that the concept here is to, for lack of a better phrase, and I'm just freestyling, they want to build a better San Francisco. And with that in mind, have to ask you guys, what do you think? Good idea, bad idea?
Better San Francisco, that regular people can afford to live in?
Let's put a pin in that part.
That too,
What do you think, Matt?
One person's utopia is another person's dystopia, I would argue. I don't know. Seems sus.
I'm just looking at the area from above. So just on Google Maps here, if you must know.
Sure.
San Francisco, right there like a peninsula, hanging out, chilling, doing its thing, all the water around it. That's looking good. Now I'm coming up to Fairfield, a little bit northeast,
warmer.
Looking at this land that, at least from the sky on the satellite, doesn't look that exciting. I don't know. It's not very green. It's not desert. It's really just kind of in between somewhere. And I don't know. I can't imagine that being the next, technology hub.
It's a fixer-upper. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's a fixer-upper. Here's where it gets incredibly interesting. Is the primary goal truly to build a utopian city on a hill, right? Like the Puritans of old? Or is this a way of securing access to resources that will be more important in the future? For instance, water rights. Is there some tasty groundwater, fossil water under there, or the rights to distribute that water? Or is there maybe some amount of rare earth materials that will be suddenly affordable to extract once environmental regulations get further destabilized? This is all speculation, right? And this is all stuff that is in play, but it's not proven. It's like the idea that Nessie is real. You know what I mean? It's cool to think about.
This isn't some kind of scheme like the billionaire thing to have altruism, effective altruism, or one of those things, like a bastion for that stuff.
Right. Let's handle philanthropy like a business.
Yeah. This isn't that. They're saying this is for just regular old human beings to come and live and prosper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea is that you too can be part of the dream. And the idea is that with their massive business expertise, this group, represented by Flannery Associates, will be able to, from the ground up, rethink everything about a city. So they'll say, look, we have lessons learned from San Francisco's approach to crime, or San Francisco's approach to the unhoused, so we can figure out a new way. And a lot of Silicon Valley luminaries are all about figuring out a new way, quote unquote. I'll never forget the time. I'll never forget the time it looked like some guys. Let me give you this pitch because it was hilarious. There was some guys who said, "Hey, we all know our neighborhood has some work to do. And what we're thinking is instead of, bowing before these municipalities that don't represent us, what if we started a thing where everybody in the community put in some amount of money and then we collectively use that to fix problems in our community?" And these guys, I swear to God, did not know they had accidentally reinvented taxes.
Or also like communism, kind of, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you remember when those guys invented that new drink that was supposed to give you all your nutrients, and they named it after
Soylent?
Yeah.
Soylent Green is people.
They didn't even make it people,
It's
though.
people.
It's just like a bunch of amino acids and almond milk.
Well, but also Soylent on itself just makes me think of soiling oneself. That is what that brings to mind every time I hear Soylent. I don't understand what they're going for with that, but it seems to be very popular.
It is.
I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. There's also Huel. Get it? Human fuel. Portmanteau.
My favorite is the thing they serve in prisons, Nutroloaf. You always point that one out, Ben. It's just it's good branding that you wouldn't think would be worth the time to brand something that's only served in prison.
So anyhow, these folks spent hundreds of millions of dollars. We're talking like north of $800 million getting all this land.
Dang.
And then it goes into the idea of your time horizon. Right. So one of the reasons that the wealthiest entities in terms of real estate are so wealthy is that if you are, and I know this will sound old school conspiratorial, and I've been getting a lot of pressure not to use the C word anymore, but this is true. The crown of the United Kingdom, right? The Catholic Church, they're real estate giants because they can lose money for decades, right? They can hold on to something at a loss for centuries. And most entities, individuals or institutions, are simply not capable of doing that. Flannery Associates probably is. So they can hold on to this land for a fallow period, whether that's economical or agricultural, and then they can be there when it matters, right? So I don't know, like I've looked into a little bit of the consideration for what is often called a utopian city. I don't know if I quite like the phrase, you guys, because the word utopia inherently means something that cannot exist. It is too perfect to exist. But if they can build a city that is equitable, if they can help people, maybe it'll work. It smells like a company town to me. It smells like some other attempts top down in past civilizations, and they didn't work out well.
And doesn't a utopia, or, in any form, again, to your point, it's more of like a thought experiment than a real thing. Doesn't it usually involve some amount of exclusion, of types of people, or perhaps certain races, certain people of economic strata? I don't know. For some reason, in my mind, utopia always has a sinister undertone to it because of the fact that it usually is kind of eugenic in some way. I don't know. Maybe that's just my sci-fi brain.
No, I'm with you. It makes sense because, it conjures fears of technocracy gone wrong. So technocracy is the idea that there is a cadre of very talented and successful technical people, engineers, and so on, who are able to use their scientific understanding to create a better civilization. The problem with that is it naturally leads into what we could call libertarianism gone wild. You know what I mean? I don't know about you guys. I'm pretty sure we're on the same page. All of us listening tonight, I don't think we want a country where someone can be born into a tier of citizen. You know what I mean? Imagine going into the city, right? And you can unlock premium citizenship. You know what I mean? Or you're born with signature citizenship or citizenship plus. This kind of stuff opens the door for it. I mean, right now they're running into, the natural barriers, not just the people who don't want to sell their property, but they're also running into questions about pre-existing municipalities. And this makes us think of the Reedy Creek Improvement District. You know what I mean? Because Disney did it right.
Yeah. I don't know, guys. I think I'm drinking the Soylent on this one. I think I want in. I want premium citizenship. Let's go.
You buy some shares?
Yeah, let's do this. And I'm really interested in other things, other projects that are supposedly like this, like the line in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
I know that it's probably far-fetched that it actually works out in any way similar to how it's being projected, right? In the same way, if you get a deck for a new podcast, it's all shiny and it's like, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be incredible. And the thing in the end is like 85 to 90% of like how pristine that was. I'm being honest. Like,
sure,
there's almost always that way. It's,
or
there is
pictures of Taco Bell food.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's never going to be the way it looks. But if we don't strive or let people with, ambition and money strive to make improvements on things, like what the heck are we going to do? Just be okay with the crap that we got? I don't know.
To quote a Scottish poet, going back to Loch Ness that I love, Robert Burns, man's reach must exceed his grasp, or else what's a heaven for?
There you go.
But don't you think there's just kind of a general malaise, or maybe not malaise, distrust towards these technocrats?
Yeah,
that
there should
maybe gives pause to things like, okay, cool. Yeah, just making sure we're on the same.
So we have some questions here, and perhaps we will do an episode on this in the future. But for now, we are living in a time when history is being made. We know real estate is very sensitive in the US and the world. We also know, I think we should do an episode on how, of all things, private insurance companies are trying to warn people about climate change in the worst possible way, but they're doing their best. I suggest we pause for now, and we will absolutely do an update if someone finds Nessie. We're absolutely going to learn more about worms in the brain. Matt, we didn't even talk about whether some sort of alteration of ambient temperature may have allowed that nematode egg to enter into a human body in a way that it hadn't before, because pythons are native to Australia, I believe, right? So people have run around and met those eggs before. I don't know. Maybe it's a lottery. Anyway, so we're going to call it an evening. We're out to noctivigate and to call our friends at Flannery Associates, see how their $150 million lawsuit against those farmers are going. And in the meantime, if you want to contact us, if you want to join up with the show, we cannot wait to hear from you. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff on Facebook, YouTube, and the social media network formerly known as Twitter, Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram and TikTok.
Hey, do you like to use your voice to call people the way friend of the show Sarah Cottonoff called in the middle of our discussion just a minute ago? Sorry about that, guys. I muted and let her know we were recording. You can call us 1-833-STDWYTK. You got 3 minutes. Give yourself a cool nickname and leave a voicemail. Say whatever you want. Just let us know if we can use your name and message on one of our listener mail episodes. Hey, if you don't want to do that, but you want to send us links, a story, more stuff, longer than 3 minutes, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.